Good morning.
Morning.
Please feel free to shift your position so you can see better. I hope people are cool enough. Out in the garden, looks like there's a little wind. That's nice. So I hope everyone was able to see the weekly mailing that said that we had postponed what we had originally planned for today, which was a dedication of a new statue of Kuan Yin, Bodhisattva of compassion. And there's one really big reason for that, and then there was another reason that also seemed important. The first reason was the statue is not here. It made it through customs in Los Angeles, and then there was something wrong with the address, so the customs officials there sent it back to China. It's been going for like 3 months to get here. And so I went around and around with the people at the post office and things, but there's nothing that can be done. So they're on their way back to China, and then hopefully we'll turn around and then come back here with the correct labeling, but we'll see how that all goes. So that was one big reason. It's very hard to have the dedication of the new icon without the new icon actually being here. It might be possible, but I don't know how. And then it's so hot. We thought it would maybe a great day to encourage everyone to stick around and hang out in the garden in the sun. And so we will have a celebration later on, and we'll work that out when it comes. Good news, this Wednesday there'll be a shift in the mask mandates. So that's nice. So expect that next week things will look a little bit different. And that'll all come out on the mailing, a little bit different in how we organize ourselves for Sunday mornings. I'd like to continue today talking about what I had started discussing last week, which I had titled Seeing Enlightenment. I was focusing on the importance of images, really all kinds of images. Everything that we see, we can think of as being an image. We don't have to confine it just to sight. It can also be anything that we hear, or we smell, or we taste, or touch, or we think. It has a kind of shape, right? It has a form. And when I say images, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about what you see with the eye, although that becomes the very common and convenient way. The language of seeing is the common and convenient way to talk about it. So much of my habit of talking about it and the habit of talking about it within spiritual traditions and within Buddhism will use sight. And it's literally sight, but it's also something broader than sight. Maybe we could say the sense gates. You know, if you think about what it's like to be experiencing some heat in the summer, there is just the direct experience of heat, and then there's all kinds of things that go along with that. There's all kinds of things that go into the way that you experience the heat, which is unique to you, unique to your karma, to the causes and conditions of your being, in which that's how you experience the heat. I experienced a big shift in the way that I experienced heat living in Japan, where it's very hot and humid. And it's just sticky. You just get up in the morning and you just know I'm going to be sticky all day. And before that, I couldn't stand it. You know, you get a little sticky and you're just like, I'm sticky. The form, the image, what you're thinking is like, I'm sticky. I can't stand it. Push away, push away, push away, push away. Which is very natural. Actually, it's quite nice to be kind of baby powder, no stickiness. Right? But then I went to live there, and then it gets very hot. Not like Southeast Asia, for those of you who traveled to Cambodia or Thailand or Vietnam. It's not like that, all right? But it's a lot more than here. So, it'll be in the 90s, and then the humidity will be it's like the maximum possible saturation of humidity, 95 or something like that, And so you sweat, but it doesn't evaporate. It's just heat. So if you spend some time there and you don't run away from it too much, and you have a physical being that can put up with it without like getting sick or whatever, you can experience this kind of shift. You start developing a different image of the heat. A different way of experiencing it starts to starts to emerge. I got to the point where I want the heat to come. I don't want it to be all summer, but I want it to come. Otherwise, the fall doesn't ever really feel like the fall, So for me, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying for me, that's the way that it started to shift a little bit. So the stickiness and all those kinds of things is a little uncomfortable, but also has this context of this is the point where that happens. I just bring that up because I want to make an example of what I mean by image. We could say it's framing. It's how it is that we hold experience. It is what is not just there in the picture, but it is everything about how it is that we experience something. And images are fundamental to consciousness. They're fundamental to what we mean by experience. And so Buddhist images or religious images are very important for us to take them seriously, not just to kind of disregard them as being something that is, it's just a form, it's just a picture of the Buddha, which we do so often. And in fact, that's the habit of where we sit culturally. We've gone through a long period of time, several centuries in the West, in which images have been disempowered, they have been flattened. We hear ourselves say things like, well, it's just a picture. It's not the real thing, it's just a picture. It's just, some dots on a paper. And now that we've become better at producing images, and it's become, very easy to manipulate images. You can see people say things that they didn't actually say, etc. That this is only ramping up. The amount of time that we are in relationship to this screen, this kind of two-dimensional surface in which images are put before us all the time, it's very easy for us to start to disregard images, any individual image, as being important in and of itself. It is an image among images, and they all become equalized in some way. I think that there's a cumulative effect to this in which we start regarding images as not being worthy of a deep attention or a deep care. And this has a real cost. Because images are important, but because images are foundational to our consciousness. So the way we're experiencing the world is tied into these images. So we can't just say, they're just images, right? That's like saying, it's just the center of your consciousness. It's just the place on which everything you know to be life is built, right? It doesn't make sense to put just there, right? It's like, no, actually, we should really take care of that. Now, there's all kinds of ways in which images have been used to manipulate us and continue to be used to manipulate us. So I'm not saying the images are safe. They're actually dangerous, which most important things are. Most important things are both important and dangerous in some way. Now, it's kind of a recap of last week, but maybe another way of saying it is one thing that happens in our spiritual practice is that we've come to rely on what I'm going to call a nihilistic framing of the ultimate. So let me explain that. So when we think about the ultimate, spirituality is concerned with that. What is wholeness? What is fundamental? Maybe we say what is spirit. In some traditions, maybe we say what is God. In Buddhism, we say what is awakening. Whatever it is that we put there in that word ultimate. We have picked up a habit of a nihilistic framing of what that ultimate would be. What I mean by that is we think that the particulars are in the way of the ultimate. We think like if I could get rid of all of this BS, then I would know God. Or then I would be awakened. If I could get rid of all of my thoughts, that would be the place where I would wake up. And much of our teaching could lead us to believe this, right? So sit down and clear the mind. Right? We hear that a lot in the Zen teaching. And it's not wrong exactly, but it has a real limitation, especially if we think the clearing the mind is that we're going to sweep aside all of the particulars, and that's where the ultimate will be encountered. outside of the particulars. This is a fundamental spiritual misalignment, which I would say runs rampant in our minds. And you have to watch for it. I'm not saying that you sit down and you have a philosophical argument to support this. I'm saying this is the way that we see the world. And so you have to watch for it. Watch for the place where you're like, if I could just get rid of this, if I could just get rid of that, this part of myself that I don't like so much, if that could just go away, that's where God would be. Right? And especially if we take up a discipline of meditation, it's very easy for us to start thinking that way, because when we have the absence of some certain things, we feel a sense of ease come over us. And we think, that must be what awakening is. I feel comfortable there, I feel happy there, I feel fulfilled there. Right? And then when the challenge comes along, we think, no, I don't want that. How do I get it put aside? This kind of framing is it's a grasping after non-being. That would be the technical Buddhist way of diagnosing that sickness, is that we're grasping on to non-being. Because non-being takes care of a lot of problems, i.e. all of them. If you weren't, no problem. Right? And our consciousness has that capacity, our being has that capacity to see if it just wasn't, then okay. And there's very extreme examples of this that are running rampant through our society today. Particularly young men, but not only young men, are killing themselves at an alarming rate, and is increasing, like 30% a year. Oregon's at the top of the list. Just in case you thought you lived in the groovy place where that doesn't happen. It's not. So I'm not saying that this nihilistic framing is what's causing all that. I'm saying it's involved. Right? It's involved. So particulars are not something for us to brush aside or disregard. They are worthy of our deep attention and care. And all of those particulars are deeply tied into image. To encounter the ultimate is not to push aside images. It's not to push aside experience. And this is something that the practice invites us into in a very, I think, very, very direct way, that can be powerful, but also is not trying to mow us over. It's not trying to break something, but is more like an invitation. One of the most famous stories in our lineage, in all Zen lineages, actually, is the transmission of the Dharma from the Buddha Shakyamuni to Mahakāssapa. It's very short. This is from the transmission of the light by Keizon Zenji, who's Dogen Zenji, the founder of the school's kind of like great grandson in the Dharma, and one of the great founders of our tradition in Japan. Dogen Zenji and Keizon Zenji are thought to be the kind of the twin founders of Soto Zen. So he recounts the case this way. He says, the first ancestor, Venerable Mahakāssapa, when the world-honored one held up a flower and blinked his eyes, Kāssapa cracked a slight smile. The world-honored one said, I have the treasury of the true Dharma I, the sublime mind of nirvana, which I entrust to Mahakāssapa. The first ancestor, Venerable Mahakāssapa. When the world-honored one held up a flower and blinked his eyes, Kāssapa cracked a slight smile. The world-honored one said, I have the treasury of the true Dharma I, the sublime mind of nirvana, which I entrust to Mahakāssapa. Now this story gets told and understood in many different ways. It itself is an image of the Buddha Shakyamuni, in his seat of teaching. He doesn't say anything. He picks up a flower. Mahakāssapa smiles. In this translation, this is a very literal translation. They crack a smile. Right? He just, you can. It's just. Mahakāssapa is he's like the hardcore of the hardcore monks underneath the Buddha. He's known for his ascetic practice. Always very shabby robes. It's said that the Buddha would share his seat with Mahakāssapa when they would travel. because when he was born, Mahakashapa means something like light swallower. It said that when he was born, the whole room was filled with a celestial light, and then it all entered into his mouth. And so they called him light swallower, Mahakashapa. And he was very close a student of the Buddha, the first ancestor within the Zen tradition. So this story gets told again and again. Just like any image, it can teach us a lot. And it teaches us different things at different times. And the image lives in your heart in the way that it lives in your heart, and teaches you in the way that it teaches you. That's the beauty of an image, is it's not something that's just outside. That's the way we often think about it, right? Like I saw a picture of, I saw a statue of, I saw a photo of, I saw so-and-so, I experienced such and such, as if all of those things were outside of us. But part of what this story is hinting at, or is pointing to, is it's not outside. This is what the Buddha is entrusting to Mahakashapa. This I, this true I, which is not the Buddha's alone. So if we think about this again as just one slice, we think of sight. We think of Mahakashapa, the Buddha, that whole assembly, and that one flower. You know, the image is that the Buddha picked it up and he slightly twirled it in his finger. You can almost feel what that must have been like. Maybe you can even almost see a flower in my hand. What is that? To see a flower. Or a baby. Or a burnt out tree if you travel up into the forest. Or a sweltering field. Or a flying friend. Keep us company during our meditation. To see them, to hear them, to smell, all of those senses. There's something precious, not located in an outside object, but located in the seeing itself. The Buddha holds up a flower. There's no thing, there's no image that is really caught in grasping. We could understand what the Buddha was doing holding up that flower is this total expression of that. You are not lost. He's telling his students that all the time, but mostly they can't believe it. You're seeing this flower. There's a very famous Zen master in Japan named Bankei Zenji. And people would come and ask him questions, and all he would say is, "Oh, you're already enlightened. Can't you hear the sound of the river? You're already enlightened. Go away." He had no successors. We're not sure if that's because his teaching wasn't very good or his teaching was so good. It could be either one. Yeah. But I love that image. It's like the Buddha, then he says, "Oh, I have the wondrous mind of nirvana, the true I, the I which cannot be manipulated, the I which cannot be forcibly handled." It's like the path of birds, neither comes nor goes. That mind is right there. Now each sense, each phenomena is held up by the Buddha in that way. That's one way we can understand this teaching. It's not caught. It's not caught in grasping. It simply is the expression of total interdependence. To be able to encounter any phenomena is an expression of the total interdependence of our being. That I cannot locate it as mine or as not mine. This is a simple truth which we cannot grasp. And that's why we have things like meditation. Yeah? Because we don't want to grasp it. I mean, we want to grasp it maybe, but we can't. So we have to have some way to understand it more. Not as an object of our grasping, but as the movement of our own life, the intimacy of our own being. So this is the kind of thing that images invite us into. They're not just pictures. They're not just reminders, like I should be thinking about something else than what I'm thinking about now. Not that kind of reminder. They're a reminder which is like, oh, so I think we can talk about a medicine that comes from the Buddha Dharma here, which has to do with restoring our senses, deflattening the way that we tend to flatten our experience. That's one way we can understand what practice is, rather than having, oh, just an image, oh, just a flower, oh, just a anything. That we restore the spaciousness. Not the spaciousness which is like if I could get rid of all the particulars, then there would be space. But the spaciousness that is right there as all of the experiences of our life. Right? All those phenomena. They are spaciousness. And the place that I would encourage you to start is the very core Buddhist teaching, relinquishment. I know I sound like a broken record, but the relinquishment of grasping, this is just, it's immediate, central, and unending, and really unyielding in its invitation. We have an endless supply of sense objects. Now, I'm not talking about because we have the demon boxes and everything, although those like speed it up in some way. But just being a being of consciousness, you have an endless supply of sense objects. You can just, if you're sitting around, you're bored, you're waiting for the bus or something, do you ever just sit there and just think of what you could think about? It's kind of fun. I think it's fun. You just think about, oh, what could I think about? Oh, pink elephant. Oh, okay, pink elephant. Oh, flying pink elephant. Oh, what else? You could just think forever. There's universes there. Or you could just look around. There's endless things for you to grab onto. And if you want to get them a little emotional charge, just like them or dislike them. Right? And then you get a little, things form up. Now there's something to do. We really never satiated in this realm. That's why there's so many encouragements, so much kind of warning within the Buddhist teaching about sense grasping, about grasping after sense pleasure, and pushing against sensory uncomfortableness and trying to get away from it. Because it just never ends. It's a treadwheel. It's really like the hamster wheel for us. And particularly, I would say, in our modern situation, we're never satiated. And we don't have to be. Albertsons has a self-checkout line. What would you like? Cupcakes? There they are. If you have the resources. And even those people who have meager resources, who have access in a way that humans have never had access before. So we're missing that point where we come to satiation. You come to the end of a meal and you say, oh, I'm full. And I stop, and then you can go, wow, I ate. I'm full. What does the air smell like when I'm full? But that's not so how much we're oriented. We tend to just okay, I got done with that, move on to something else. I've I've kind of wrapped up that part of my sensory grasping. What could I go to next? I get to my phone, I get to my TV, I'll go for a walk, see how many birds I can see, whatever it is. My wife told me this hilarious thing. She was staying at the coast for last week for a night with her friends to see the puffins. The puffins are such funny looking birds, and they come around and they were there to watch them. And the place they were staying were these birders, these heavy birders that run this little hotel in Cannon Beach. And she said that they do these bird watching competitions. They have like race to see who could see the many birds the quickest. I don't know if you have to take pictures or something, to prove that you saw them. But my guess is if you were really into it, you wouldn't lie. You would just kind of go through it. That's not what's interesting to me about birds. I don't know, races, people like competition, so I guess that could be fun. But what I'm bringing up now is I think that's just kind of how our mind is all the time. It seems a little weird to me to do that, but actually when I think about it, I think we're all doing that like much of the time. We're racing around, like seeing what we can get it in the basket, get the picture of it, do what, clinging, clawing into the next moment. What's the next thing I can experience and grasp? What's the next thing I can experience and grasp? What's the next thing? Now, I know I'm sounding pretty negative here, and it's not that it's all negative. It could be pizza, right? It's like, oh, pizza. And there's something fine about that, but there's also something deadening about it. And our compulsion to keep that going all the time is part of what that's part of what produces the flattening. So when I say the relinquishment of grasping, I don't mean you have to get a really sort of no fun hater face and just like push away everything in your life that you think is interesting. But I mean, how will you encounter the things that you care about with a fullness of your consciousness? How will you pace it in a way that when you come to the end of the thing, you let go? That when you see that phenomena, when you taste that phenomena, when you hear that phenomena, when you feel that phenomena, when you think, when your mind's eye sees that phenomena, that it's not just about how do I keep that phenomena going or skip to the next phenomena when I'm bored of this one or done with it in some way, but how do I let it come apart, let it fall apart, let it disappear, let it lead me to the place of its own absence. Not only lead me to needing to concretize it or keep it as a thing. Now this is different than what you'll hear people say. Oftentimes they'll say, well, just pay attention to what is simply here, what is actually here. Okay? That's not what I'm saying. Because in that, there's a weird little mental gymnastics that's happening. You're saying, I could have a sense of what's actually here. And mostly when I say that, I mean a reality that I've decided is objectively there. And if I could get rid of all of my subjective kind of experience, and I could just rest my mind on, the stuff that I'm pretty sure is, there, that's another kind of grasping. It's actually, in a way, more problematic grasping. Because you're reifying something and just trying to keep it solid and calling it actual and everything else non-actual. You're splitting everything into. Sometimes people talk about this, though, to really be like, oh, just experience the present moment. As if the present moment was not also an image. The present moment is an image. There's no thing called a present moment aside from your experiencing of it. Things aren't just how they are. Things are you. And you are them. So when we practice this kind of relinquishment, again, the point is not to get all kind of like, be a fun hater, right? And but it's also not to divide the world into what I've decided is real and not real and just set my mind on what I've decided is real. It's to take seriously all of the images, all of the phenomena, as being the same quality as that flower. They're all held by the Buddha. They're all held up by the Buddha. They are all awakening, showing up in that moment, as that moment. Not because they're real in some verifiable sense out there, but simply because they are a phenomenon, because they are seen, and we are seen through them. In Dogen Zenji's teaching, he always is referring to this kind of practice as the backward step. He says, take the backward step that turns the light and shines it back. Don't just shine the light of consciousness out into the verification of independent objects, but let the meeting of an object be the total exchange of light. I'm receiving that light. It's coming in through. You know, in a literal sense, if we think about seeing as the metaphor for it, the light enters into my pupils. I'm receiving the light. And in that reception of the light, the Buddha is there holding that flower, showing that flower. Now, we don't see the Buddha necessarily, you know, if I hold up this stick. But that doesn't mean there's no Buddha holding up this stick. What does your heart see? What do you consider to be the important things to include in your formation of the image? Is the stickiness of the heat just the inconvenience of life? Or is it the full expression of being alive? So this has to do with a sensing rather than a grasping after sense objects. It is the sensing of the intimate heart. I use the word heart. I don't mean something sentimental. I don't mean it is the emotional as apart from other parts of our sensing. When I say heart here, I mean heart like the heart of an artichoke. You know, like it's the very center of the being. It's the intimate of intimates. It's the chamber that no one can enter. You can't go into it. You can't open the door and step in. Because that's all objectifying. That you actually have to receive that heart. Just as Mahakashapa received it from the Buddha, received the eye of nirvana. And these images of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the ancestors and the spirits and that we cultivate in a temple environment, they're all about that intimate of intimates. In a way, no different than anything else. And the Buddha is holding up each one. So, we play house. We put on our robes, we burn incense, we light candles, we prostrate. Because there's no such thing as just an image. However it is that we live. That is the image of our